You and I met 15 years ago. You helped me when you didn't have to. We're going to make this whole interview about your hot takes, right? And it's not just hot takes. I think it's more about the new playbook on like how you're building product at scale and like hopefully how that can be applicable to other product leaders listening.
To me, it's very simple, right? It's take something, break it into the core components of that something, which is the problems, the assumption. And it was a lot about, hey, let's not waste time discussing this in the room. Just run the experiment and get the results. If you're just optimizing for one of the parties and you don't take care of the other one, you may make also decisions that alienate your users, right?
Maybe it turns into a playbook. It's called principles. I'm going to read them because I want to put them out there and then have you react. Number one is, hey, this is Carlos, CEO of Product School and the host of the Product Podcast. Today's guest is Manuel Bronstein, Chief Product Officer at Roblox. Roblox is a platform that lets people create and play games, share experiences with friends, and even build businesses in immersive virtual worlds. The company went public in March of 2021 and is currently valued at over $40 billion. They have over 97 million daily active users, growing over 26% year over year, and paid out almost $1 million to its creator community in 2024 alone. Manuel's career spans product leadership roles at the Xbox, Zynga, YouTube, and Google Assistant, giving him unparalleled expertise in building marketplace and game platforms. In this episode, he shares his unique playbook for product success, focusing on 10 counterintuitive principles that challenge conventional wisdom. We break down each of these principles, exploring how they have helped shape the way he builds product now. It's one of our best episodes, not just because it was recorded from a beautiful skyscraper overlooking the San Francisco Bay Area, but because Manuel is one of the most humble yet straightforward product leaders I know. Let's dive in. Well, welcome to the Product Podcast, Manuel.
Thank you for having me here, Carlos.
As I told you though, a few weeks ago, you and I met 15 years ago. You helped me when you didn't have to. I started a company before Product School, and we were part of the 500 Startups Accelerator Program. You were a mentor there. I think at that time you were working for Zynga.
That's probably the case, 15 years ago. Yeah.
And you gave me a ton of advice and feedback. You were extremely supportive. You also crushed. You also ripped apart a lot of the things in my product, always from a really caring place. And
Sorry.
it was incredible. And then many years later, I'm so happy that, stars align and we're here. And
I'm so glad we're having the opportunity to do this 15 years later, for sure.
So now you're the Chief Product Officer at Roblox.
Correct.
You've been there for around 4 years.
4 years now.
Cool. But you've been in games for a long period of time. So what's your relationship with video games?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I as a kid, I did play a lot. I remember I grew up and I had the fortune to try some of the consoles as they were coming out. But, you never imagine that you're going to work in the industry. And I was living in Venezuela as a kid when I was playing. So the last thing that comes to mind is that you're going to get to work in the industry. Even though as a kid, you're always thinking, I can make that game better. Fortunately, I came to the United States. I joined a company startup that was doing online trading cards for media and entertainment companies. So there was some elements of gaming there that got me connected to the media entertainment industry, to gaming in some way. Then went to business school and realized that there was a way to have a career in the space. It's not that I ever planned it, but one thing led to the other. Now, the interesting thing for me, Carlos, is that although I like gaming and I love gaming, I like platforms better. So when I had the opportunity after business school, I went to Xbox. And part of the reason was not so much, I want to build this game, but it was this idea, and this is back in 2003. Now I'm going to date myself. And Xbox was building a console that at the first time was a console with a hard drive and an Ethernet port. And as a product person, I started thinking about all the possibilities. Oh, wow, you're going to be able to download games. You're going to be able to stream stuff. You're going to be able to play multiplayer. And that's what got me excited. And, like what happens in life, one thing leads to another, and here I am.
So it's been Xbox, Zynga, YouTube,
and Google Assistant, and Roblox. Yeah.
So what are some of the dynamics that you've seen that are similar across some of those platforms?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few things that are common threads. And I joke, one of my jokes is that if you took all my past jobs and they had a baby, it would look a lot like Roblox in so many ways. And now Roblox is a very grown up. But it's, there's the elements of when you're building platforms, whether it's YouTube or whether it's Xbox and Roblox, you're building a product that it's not only for consumers, but you're also building a product that it's for developers or creators in the case of YouTube. And you need to think about those dynamics. You need to think about, hey, I'm not only building a solution that is optimizing just for one of the stakeholders, but you're trying to understand how do you make everybody happy and successful with your platform. And then, in the case of YouTube, you layer in advertisers as well, and Roblox is beginning to do advertising as well. So you need to think about a third stakeholder, right? The other part is it's fun. You're working with entertaining products. I mean, when you talk to people in the street and you tell them what you're working on, they smile and they
Cool that working video.
yeah. It's been part of my journey has been how do I work on things that my kids love, right? And then been fortunate that has been the case. But um, it's there's a lot of creative work associated with making something fun, right? There are some things that you can quantify, but there are some things that you cannot quantify. Or you try to find ways to say, is this thing gonna work? Is this thing gonna be fun? That's why I also like the platform better, because on the platform, you're really opening it up for anybody to create and anybody to be successful. And you don't have to be necessarily thinking about each individual game yourself. You're just creating the conditions for this amazing content and experiences or games to be created. And that has been super fun as well.
Now, give me an overview of where Roblox is today.
Yeah, look, I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, Roblox is a 3D immersive platform where people can create content, experiences, games, and other people join and enjoy those things together. So there's an element of, this notion of you're embedded in a 3D immersive world. You don't have to wear goggles to be in it. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer. But then the other part is that you're never doing it alone. You're doing it with your friends, you're doing it with other people. So it's great a moment where you have two sides or two things that make the experience really fun. On one end is the content, and the other end is the people that you're there with. And there's communication and so forth. The platform started now 2006, so 19, almost 19 years ago. And basically, it started from the concept of building physics and simulation for physics. And people very quickly started looking at things, collisions and movement. And then it opened up for people to be there together. And then it opened up the platform for creation. And that's when everything took off, right? So when the platform decided, hey, now people can create on top of this foundation that we built, a lot of more people keep coming, and then open it up for business so that those creators could also not only build something, get users or fans, but eventually build a business on top of them, build a studio. And now fast forward to today, it's 2025. In our last report, we were in the vicinity of 86 million daily active users and growing fast. We have millions of developers out there. We paid out about more than $900 million to the community of creators in the last 12 months. And those numbers continue to grow. So now you're seeing gamers and players and users of all ages coming to the platform. Started with younger audience, but now the majority of our users are over the age of 13, and the fastest growing group is 17 to 24. And then also people started creating games for hobbies, and now they have large teams, and now they have a business, and now they're building companies on top of the platform, which makes it super, super, super fun. And the opportunities are really, there's so much opportunity because you could build any type of game, but you could also build a learning experience. You can build a social experience. You can build a shopping experience. And the idea at the end of the day is that people can build on top of the platform in so many creative ways that we may not even anticipate.
When I was younger, I also love video games. I remember it was all very one dimensional. Like I would turn on the computer or the console, I would play, and that was it. And then there was a Grand Theft Auto and all these other games were more of an immersive experience where I would go and create and build my own adventure. But I think what you're describing is a whole new level. It's you can even build businesses on top of it.
It's a super big evolution. And look, one of the things that we said recently in our developer conference, almost now 6-7 months ago, we saw a big opportunity in gaming as a platform. And we as a platform believe we have the opportunity to have 10% of the gaming market revenue users flowing through Roblox. It's an industry that we are growing at 20 to 25% year over year, and the industry is growing probably low single digits. So Roblox has an opportunity to take market share and grow there. And the things that people can create, to your point, have gone from very basic games to things that look very sophisticated. And now with things like generative AI, and we just recently announced a foundation model, a 3D foundation model, and we open source it, you're making creation a lot easier. So what used to take millions of dollars and studios of hundreds of people, now maybe teams of 5, 10, 20 can get very close, or or get to enough fun and enough users that they have a viable business. So to me, it's a very amazing disruption, but it's also an acceleration of the industry.
So what I want to cover with you next is your new playbook. I remember one of the calls we had to prep for this interview. I just wanted to get a sense of what is the help of mine. And you usually have a section at the end called hot takes where, we cover one or two, but you were fireworks. You started giving me so many, like, okay, we're going to make this whole interview about your hot takes, right? And it's not just hot takes. I think it's more about the new playbook on like how you're building product at scale and like hopefully how that can be applicable to other product leaders listening within their current context.
Yeah, it's I've said this to a few people recently. It's pretty amazing. I've been doing product now for 20 something years, and at every place you learn something, but it's rare to say that 20 years in your career you're learning a lot. And I could actually say that my last 4 years at Roblox has been like a super steep ramp of learning of new ways and new approaches to do things. And combining that with the things that I've learned in the past, I have developed some intuition. I don't know if it's a playbook really, and I don't know that I have exercised it as a playbook, but it's the kind of things, the way I think about it, and seeing it in works and seeing it with the teams working and the results, it's also give you some good confidence and validation that, okay, there's something good here.
Yeah. Maybe it turns into a playbook. It's called principles. I will see. I'm going to read them because I want to put them out there and then have you react. Number one is build fast, learn faster. Turn big visions into quick MVPs. Real user feedback beats endless whiteboarding.
Yeah, that one it's an interesting one. Look, when you think about building product, there's an area of building product that is the vision and the innovation, right? Your opportunity to do something better than something that existed or something that has never existed before. And great product leaders have not only that, the opportunity to identify those opportunities, but to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out and thinking about, okay, if this is successful, and always with optimism, what will this look like? What do I need to build? The hard part is, again, you need to marry that with very rapid execution. So it's not about, oh, let's go diagrams, like do whiteboarding, let's start typing things, let's build 200 decks. It's about how do you go from that vision to the next incremental step in execution that allows you to start validating and start learning. So you learn fast by taking those products to market sooner, putting it in the hands of customers, users, or whatever, and taking that feedback. And as you go and learn, you continue to iterate. But it always starts with that vision that is somewhere in the future. I used to have a term called best imaginable experience, where you really remove all constraints and you think about what's the best thing that I could build here. And then you work back from that and you start removing all the barriers, but you need to start executing really, really fast.
And I think that is the unique piece, especially in a large enterprise. Obviously, in startup, like there is no plan B. You have to execute fast or you die.
Right.
In a larger company, sometimes there is something that is working, so it takes longer to die.
Right.
But the death is there. So how do you actually ensure that people are feeling that type of pressure and need to move fast?
Yeah, and it will connect to one of the other principles, but there's an element of radical urgency, right? And again, it's a combination of two things. It's having the clarity that even though you have a big vision that is 3 years out, you can break it down in pieces, and you can actually componentize it to the point that you could say, the first thing that I'm going to do is X. But rather than saying that first thing is 1, 2 years away, you need to think about the next thing that is 1 week away, 2 weeks away, a month away, the longest, and say, okay, how do I work to get there, to get the next phase of validation? The other part is this, and I'll jump into one of the other principles and back, but I talk about radical urgency, which is, in large companies, you talk a little bit about the the I call it the fallacy, or the weird belief that things will always take 2 weeks, right? So you go into a meeting, you go to a review, someone shows you something, you give them feedback, you have a discussion about it, and you say, okay, let's follow up with next steps. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And you say like, no, wait, why 2 weeks? Like, why cannot we have a meeting or a conversation tomorrow, or an email or bullet points? And it's not to put a lot of pressure in people. It's actually to get to super fast alignment. Because if you go for 2 weeks and you do a lot of work, and then you come back and you show something, and there's lack of alignment in that something, I don't want to say you wasted the 2 weeks, but you probably lose some time there, right? Lost some time there. Whereas if you actually go and say, okay, let me actually draft it very quickly, let me draw it in the sketch on the board, let me actually put the bullet points, and then we all nod and say like, we agree. Now you can take another week to build something that was very well aligned. And I think that if you start applying that level of urgency, like, it's as simple as asking, why not tomorrow? Why not today? And more often than not, people will look at you first strangely, and then they said, yeah, I can get you something out today. And I think that getting that sense of urgency and validation, you just need to be on top of it and remember to ask all the time, and it will happen.
That's actually the other principle I want to cover. It says move with urgency, push for speed, share early, and address conflicts head on.
Yeah, and it's related to that, because the other part is, as organizations start growing, there are multiple teams, there are multiple areas, points of alignment and dependencies and so forth. And conflict can arise, right? In some way or the other. I mean, if not everybody's rowing in the same direction, if not everybody's aligned. And what I have seen as a pitfall is that people let that linger. Okay, yeah, we're thinking differently, but we can talk past each other. We can be a little bit, ignore each other, and maybe we'll converge. I think that doesn't work. That's really a waste of time. I think that you need to get the people in the room and say, okay, where do we disagree? What are the points? Have the discussion up front with the right people in the room, and then make a decision and do the disagree and commit if needed. Someone needs to make the decision. But the death in execution and the slowdown in execution comes many times from misalignment, not tackling the conflicts heads on, and giving everybody 2 weeks to get to the answer, right?
My coach always says, what's unspoken becomes unspeakable. And that references what you're saying of addressing this early, head on, trying to do repair or at least get to a productive place versus just assuming that things will get figured out down the line.
100%.
And I think the other piece you mentioned, combining to the first principle, is just where you put your attention is where the energy flows, right? Like just creating that sense of urgency, or like, I'm looking at this, I think sends the message to people that that's important.
So it's also kind of like developing this understanding that, look, even when you set some target that is multiple years out, one of the most important things is start getting some validation of some of those assumptions, some of those hypotheses that you make. And a great way to get validation is to put something out there, right? And to start getting real reactions. And especially in our case, when at Roblox, where you're a platform, we cannot always predict exactly what the community of creators is going to build with what we created. We have some ideas, of course, we discuss what's possible, but they are so creative, they're so smart, and they more often than not surprise us. So if we keep dragging and not putting those things out there, we're never going to learn the amazing things that they're doing. And that immediate feedback is energizing. It helps you shape the vision better, and it helps you steer the teams in the right direction.
And I think it starts from you, right? Like you are leading by example. You are saying this has to move faster, and maybe it wasn't part of the previous QBR, but I don't care. Let's talk about it now.
Yeah, and that's another one. I mean, it's not a principle per se, but there's also this notion, that moving things around or shifting things is kind of failure of planning. Oh wow, you set the yearly goals and now you're changing them, but the world is moving fast. Things are moving fast. Like, not subjecting yourself to, I'm not going to change anything because we set a 1 year goal or to multiple quarters. Now, it doesn't mean that you're radically shifting the direction every time you go. You still have a North Star, but every quarter you have an opportunity to fine-tune the goals, fine-tune the objective, see if we learn something new that is actually pointing us in some direction. without necessarily, swinging the pendulum one extreme or the other, but really adapting to what you're seeing in the market as you go.
Well, I want to jump to the next one.
Okay.
It says, think first principles. Strip problems down to real facts, not assumptions.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about first principles, and if you read anything in multiple channels, people talk about, hey, you have to be first principles. To me, it's very simple, right? It takes something, break it into the core components of that something, which is the problems, the assumption, and get to the real hard truth. There are some elements of that are assumptions. There are some elements that are real hard truth. One of the pitfalls that I have seen is this notion of inherited assumptions, which is, hey, I work in place X, and this is the way we did it, and this is what we learned, right? And now you try to use that and feed it into the next case and the next case. And look, there's definitely learnings, right? There's pattern recognition, things that I have seen in my past life that inform how I think about things. But if you just copy paste those assumptions, you're gonna get it wrong. And I can give you an interesting example. For me, look, when I was at YouTube, search and recommendations, discovery, very big thing, very big component of the product. I spent a lot of time with those teams, and there were a lot of elements that were very interesting about how YouTube built it, right? In a user-generated content world where there's a lot of content, recommendations actually matter quite a bit. So I go to Roblox, same user-generated content in some regard, a lot of content that you need to recommend, but you now need to start understanding the nuances and the differences. So for example, when you watch a YouTube video or a TikTok video, there's a high chance that you're not going to watch that same video again, right? Maybe it was a music video that you like and you watch it again, or something you're learning, but generally speaking, you move on to the next one. Whereas on Roblox, when you discover a game or experience that you like, you may play that for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. So now shifting the recommendation to something else is probably not the right thing. Another difference is that when you're watching the videos on platforms, again, like YouTube, TikTok, you're watching them most likely alone. Whereas when you play on Roblox, you might be playing with your friends. If you don't really dig those nuances and then start mapping the thinking to how do my recommendations need to shift because the behaviors and the core of our platform is very different to the core of this platform, you're going to make mistakes. And that's just one example, but I've seen it so many times of because it worked here, it's supposed to work here. And you really need to distill it to why did it work there? What were the things that you were solving for there? And does it match to the things that you're trying to solve here? And that's where the first principles come to play.
You reminded me of a story. We had the VP of product at Netflix on the show, and he also talked about how the algorithm for movie or TV show recommendations for adults is very different than the one for kids, because kids also want to watch the same thing or
Multiple times. Yeah, that's true.
Cool. Well, I'm going to move us to the next
Yeah.
principle. Trust intuition, validate quickly from a point of view, then test it through research, experiments, or shipping.
Yeah, this is a fun one because it's the product thinking has moved in so many directions, right? There was a time where people were building product in different ways, and then metrics analytics, A/B testing came to play, and now everybody needed to be data driven, right? And you needed to always A/B test, you always needed to validate, and it's all about the data. It's not about what you think, it's not about your point of view, it's what the data says. And then, fast forward to today, and I've been in both camps. Look, in my early days at Xbox, you're building a console that it's 3 years out. You're making decisions today about something that is going to happen multiple years out. It's not data driven. There's a lot of vision and intuition that goes into that. Then I went to Zynga, which was probably one of the masters of data driven product building. And it was a lot about, hey, let's not waste time discussing this in the room, just run the experiment and get the results. And there's a mixed place or somewhere in between that it's probably smarter in my mind. On one end is, people need to trust their intuition. If you look at the most successful startups or products, I have to say, I believe that most of them were not built because someone ran an experiment or did some consumer research. It started with someone having a very bullish point of view on something a problem they wanted to solve, something that they needed to resolve for themselves, something that they wanted to see happen, and then they started building. Along the way, they were learning, but it started with that point of view. So we need to go back to letting people trust their intuition and trust their point of view. It's not something bad. Actually, your intuition is the sum of everything you have learned in your life in some way. And so you got to trust that. But then the next part of it is, okay, but now that I have that intuition, I can always validate. I can always learn if I was thinking in the right place and if the market is reacting in the right way or my customers are reacting in the right way. And that's why you need to iterate and steer. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to pivot all the way, but you start learning fast. And it goes back to the execution part, which is the sooner you start testing your hypothesis and your assumptions, the sooner you're going to know whether you were going in the right direction.
This is not your principle, it's mine. I know in product management, someone said you have to fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. When I started my companies, I never really fell in love with either the problem, maybe the solution sometimes. I just fell in love with the execution, with the psycho aspect of we are going to push this through. And of course, we're going to change things. But like the idea phase is nice. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you are not there.
You're not executed. But you need both. Like this, that's where the perfect marriage really needs to happen, right? Because the vision, the passion for something that it's not created and you want to see it happen and you believe that it's going to do well with optimism. Like I think optimism is such a big part of this, needs to be there. But now you cannot keep planning forever, right? You need to start moving. You need to start putting something out there and you immediately start getting the feedback. You immediately start getting the reactions and then that allows you to iterate and pivot.
Totally. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
You said, be a systems thinker. Every decision has ripple effects. Anticipate dependencies and impacts.
So, when people ask me, one of the best traits that a great product leader will have, I always think about anticipation. And anticipation means the ability that for you to project what are the first derivative, second derivative, third derivative of the product changes, the decision, or the features that you're creating. Especially in an ecosystem like ours and a platform where any decision that I make will have an impact on users, but will also have an impact on creators. And it may, and if you think about the derivative of these things, and I'll give you some interesting examples, is, well, if you do something that you may not see it immediately, but it's not doing it right for the developer community, eventually they may not build the content that the platform needs to succeed, and eventually your users will go away, right? And by the same token, if you're just optimizing for one of the parties and you don't take care of the other one, you may make also decisions that alienate your users, right? So to me, the system thinker is the notion that think about the problems, the products, the ecosystem as a system. Systems have inputs and they have outputs. There are consequences or derivative of when I change this thing, what happens. There's a great movie, I think it's called My Little Big Farm. It's two people in LA who decided to leave their house and build a farm, but they wanted to build it without a lot of intervention. They wanted to let the system flow. And you see in that movie how every decision they make to change something in the farm creates 2 or 3 derivative effects that they may not be anticipating. But somehow in nature, systems are in control. So for us is to think about that is, if you're building a product and you say, well, if I make this change, who are my stakeholders? What's going to happen to the user with this change? What's going to happen in my case to the creators with this change? Are there legal, policy, international implications? Are there business implications of this change? And the faster and the quicker you can map those things out, you can predict what's going to happen in each of those, the better product you're going to build, right? Some people ignore 2 or 3 and then realize and they need to backpedal and say, oh, I left this out. I didn't realize this was going to happen.
And here's, I want to push you on that because as an entrepreneur, so I think it's very important to be aware of potential implications on legal and other aspects, but ultimately trying to please all the stakeholders is impossible.
Yeah.
So how do you go about saying, okay, I'm aware of this, but I'm also going to go.
But you said the right word. It's not about pleasing, it's about awareness. It's about understanding and being deliberate about those decisions. So I could say this is going to have a problem in X market. And you may say, but I'm choosing to not worry about that now. That's a difference between saying, I didn't know that there was going to be a problem in this market, and suddenly it happened and I didn't know what to do. So the anticipation doesn't mean that you need to solve for everything, doesn't mean that you need to please everything. It means that you need to be aware or anticipate where things will go and make an on-the-fly decision of, this is okay, this is not okay, this I can let go, and so forth. Look, I'll give you an interesting example just to of the system thinking. We have recommendations on our Roblox page, and we decided one day that we wanted to introduce editorial curation. Anybody who builds recommendation systems will tell you that most likely the metrics will go down because the machine actually tends to do better than human curation in terms of personalizing content. And when you put curation, in reality, you're putting kind of like the same content for a lot of people, which doesn't do like real personalized targeting. I knew that was going to happen, but that was not the reason why we did curation. We did curation to also give the opportunity to the creators who were building something amazing on the platform to be featured before maybe the algorithm detected them. If they were updating and doing a big event, it gave us the opportunity and the flexibility to do those things. The first derivative, the metrics, the consumer metrics, did decline. It was expected to decline. But the second derivative is, what is the impact that having that curation row has in our community of creators, and are they now more eager to update, eager to build something bigger that at the end of the day will have a long-term impact in the business. And it started with intuition. It's not a metrics-driven approach. We anticipate the outcome, and you say, but I can live with that outcome because I'm actually trying to achieve something else.
And in fact, people got picking back on that. I saw in social media something happened when TikTok decided to change their feed algorithm to also feature some creator content, even if a user wasn't following that creator, and kind of giving those up-and-comer creators or get a chance. That ultimately worked so well that the rest of the social media platforms had to also update their own algorithms. And now in any news feed, you see it's mostly about creators the machine thinks you will like versus what your friends are saying.
Because in a system thinking, you would say, well, for my platform to succeed, I need to have great content. And for me to have great content, creators need to know and believe that they have a shot at succeeding in your platform, that you're going to give them the opportunity to succeed. And that gets them more excited to continue to build on your platform. So you try to connect those things.
Love that. Let's move on to the next one around simplicity. You said radical simplification. Clarity leads to better scalable solutions.
Yeah, it's funny. If you think about someone writing a document, and I'll use this as an analogy, and they write something with 10 pages long, or you ask someone a question and it takes them 2 minutes to answer, I'm probably going extreme. There's something that tells you that there's probably not clarity of thought. Because if you're really, really clear, if you're really, really crisp, if you know the answer, you can spit the answer out very quickly. You can actually write that 10-pager, maybe in a 2-pager. And I think the same goes with product, right? When you start building a product and you start trying to tweak it here, tweak it there, adding 3 different interconnected systems and so forth, because you are trying to map all the solutions, it's super important to take a step back and say like, hold on. Is there an easier way? Is there a simpler way to diagram this and to make this happen? And it's probably one of the hardest things to do. Like, getting to the simplest solution to a problem is one of the hardest things you can do. But you need to push yourself to ask for that. And you need to detect that when you're looking at the product reviews, when you're looking at the feature description and you're saying, wow, there's too much going on here. That already starts to give you a sense of, is there some way that we could actually simplify this? Is there one decision that we can make that will remove 7 of these things that we're doing and keep it simple? And I can give you some interesting examples for us. We are on a platform on Roblox. We have a marketplace where people can create avatar clothing and sell it, right? And creation has become easier, so a lot more people can participate in the market, which creates competition in highly competitive markets. And if you think about virtual clothing, there's no cost of manufacturing, there's no fabric that you need to get or whatever. It could put a lot of pressure on prices to go down. And when prices go down, it's possible that people cannot compete because, wow, I charge 2 Robux for this shirt and you come up with something very similar and you charge 1 Robux. and you're like, okay, now I cannot compete with that, or I now need to make it cheaper, and it's what you call a race to the bottom. We didn't want that to happen, and we started actually looking at the possible answers. And we said, wow, well, in the real world, and we use a lot at Roblox actually looking at the real world, or systems in real physics, real economic terms. You say, well, there's manufacturing costs. Every unit costs you some money. There's potentially different price points or tariffs now that when you put something in one country versus the other. Uh, some brands that do marketing can command higher prices. The brands that maybe do the marketing maybe cannot command higher prices. And then we started thinking, how do we bring some of those things that work in the real world to the platform? And you can start building something very, very complex. Okay, are we going to have manufacturing costs? Are we going to have different materials for each shirt? And is that going to be easy to understand? And we converge on a very simple economic principle, which is an intervention that you call floor prices, which is, hey, for every category, we're going to do an estimation of what should be the floor price for this category that generates the maximum utility for the creator and for the user. And by creating that system, it allow now the economy not to go a race to the bottom, but actually converge around these floor prices that, by the way, vary over time and create a more dynamic market. So 20 different inputs were solved with one simple decision. By the way, getting to that was not easy. That it's now an algorithm that we use to manage the marketplace.
And I think it's funny because in a way, you're now managing an economy in a virtual world.
100%.
Right? So you could also have inflation. You have to play with the different levers.
We talk about all of these things, and it's super, super interesting, right? Because you have different markets. Should the prices of items be the same in every different market? That's not a reality in real world. How can we talk a lot about the paradox of the white shirt. How do you differentiate a white shirt in the metaverse, right? Or in a 3D immersive environment where in the real world, you have cheap white shirts, very fancy white shirts, highly branded white shirts that cost a lot of money. Can you achieve that on a platform? And that's one of the questions that we put in the group and we start discussing.
I mean, in a way, when the NFTs became big, part of that promise for them was that they could limit supply in a virtual world that would technically add value for the virtual item, but obviously.
But that's one way to do it, right?
Exactly.
Scarcity is a way to create price, but in the real world, brand is a real way to create price. Materials, how the shirt fits, all those things, and you need to think about, okay, how can I create that in a digital space and make that a reality?
Principle number 6: ask the 3 whys. Form hypotheses and dig deep to find the real root cause.
Oh yeah, I learned this one actually my first job. Before I went into technology, I was at Procter & Gamble doing marketing. And there was a document where we were doing kind of like the market analysis, and one of the templates was a box that was the why. And it's very simple concept is if you really want to get to the real fact and the hard truth, when someone gives you an answer, you respond with why. And if you do that 3 times, you're really going to get to the root cause, right? So, and this is very simple in data analysis, right? If someone came to you and say, my daily active users are dropping, okay, and you say, why? And then say, well, I'm looking at markets and we're having a problem in Europe, okay, why? And then they go back and said, okay, it's not just Europe, it's actually, it's Android devices in Europe that are not performing well. And you go, why? And then said, oh, you know what? It's a performance issue that is actually affecting this type of devices that is not affecting the other. It's a very simple exercise to try to get always and distill what is the root cause of what you're trying to solve for. And by the way, it doesn't have to be 3, it could be 5 whys. But it's a point that, again, goes back to force people to go 3 layers deep. Don't leave the answer at the first. I mean, the worst one is numbers are going up or down and no explanation. The next one is the first line of explanation, but you really need to train people to go to the second and the third and the fourth line of explanation, because that's when you're going to get to the root problem. And now you're going to know what you have to solve. And that applied in marketing, that applied to product development, that applied to different types of problems.
It's funny because I apply that to my own leadership meetings. And one of the things that I add, and I'm curious to know your take, is once I really get to the root cause, then I ask, so what?
100%. So analyzing the data, cannot stop at identifying a problem. The next phase, and that's where now you start applying some of the other concepts, intuition, hypotheses, uh, you know, is formulating, okay, if this is the problem, what are the possible solutions? And now you start drawing them on the board and you say, okay, there could be 1, 2, 3 things that we can do to fix this problem. And now comes the urgency in execution. Okay, do you do one for a month and then the other one? Or do you try to do the 3 at the same time and see which one works? And it's real. Like if you actually push for the urgency and you said, hey, I don't care about false precision. I mean, sometimes you really need precision, but sometimes you don't. I don't care about false precision. If there are 3 hypotheses and we can start validating the 3 at the same time, let's start doing it and we'll learn. And it's not about being scientific about did I be tested correctly. At the end of the day, you want to solve the problem, you want to get to the answer, you want to learn. And and velocity in that scenario and the urgency comes to play.
I like how now those principles are connecting.
They work together for sure.
um, Actually, number 7 says start with the hardest problem first. Solve the biggest unknowns upfront.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And I think this one actually, I mean, super credit to our CEO and founder because he has pushed for this all the time. And I think it's a very interesting way to think about it. And it's actually, for some people, it's counterintuitive because when you're working on some products, some people say, well, tackle the low hanging fruits first. Just, get the benefits, get the quick wins, get the quick hits, and then you start building up. And, it's not that it's entirely bad or wrong, but the reality is that those things that are very obvious, you can do anytime. You have high degree of certainty that they're going to work. So whether you do them now or in a week or whatever, maybe doesn't changes anything. But the hardest ones, the ones that you have high uncertainty, you have high uncertainty about the idea, you have high uncertainty about the technology to support that idea, you have high uncertainty about the business model. Those are the ones that the sooner you validate them, the sooner you actually start learning, the more you're going to unblock your vision. So if I come up with a very amazing vision and I deconstruct it in pieces, and 5 of those are very easy and 5 of those are very hard, uh, and I start actually getting work done in the 5 easy ones, and I get them done, and now I start going with the very hard problem, and now I realize that problem I cannot solve for whatever reason, or that assumption didn't work out. I kind of wasted the time doing the other 5 easy things. Whereas if I can go very quickly at tackling the hardest problem first, and I solve that, then everything else, follow through.
So human nature is more about skipping that, right? And going to what gives us satisfaction quickly. And I'm curious to know, how do you keep yourself accountable?
Again, I want to give a lot of credit to our founder and CEO because he pushes that. But I think that we're in a company that learns a lot by example. So he pushes that to the teams. Now I push that to the teams. Now I expect the people around me to push that to their teams. So if you're this is, by the way, this is in leadership, right? If you're, as a leader, if you're super consistent and your teams know that when they come to you, they're always going to get like, but what is the hardest problem? Are you solving it or not? By the third time, hopefully they're going to anticipate and they're going to be presenting how they're solving the hardest problem, right? But you need to repeat that. You need to force yourself. But if you believe in it, it's easy. You just keep repeating it.
The 8th principle was actually covered earlier. It was around moving with urgency. I just put it after number 1. So we're going to 9. Says, think scale from the start. Do not limit solutions to tiny test groups for too long.
Yeah, this is another one that I think I learned a lot at Roblox and again from our CEO leadership. Many times you start building a product and you say, well, I'm going to do a test with 5 users, or I'm going to do the thing that it's not scalable first, which, by the way, they say when you're building a new product or new startup, you may start with the things that are not scalable. That's not the problem. The problem is, do you know what the path to scale is? Do you know what you need to do? So it's when someone comes to us and say, hey, I'm going to release to 100 people, or I want to do an alpha with 10% of the market. The next question is, but when is it go to 100%? And the product is not ready and the milestone is not ready until you go to 100%. And you cannot imagine how many times people don't have that answer because they are banking on, well, I'm going to learn something with this 10%, then I'm going to iterate for 2 months, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do again another test, and then I'm going to do it again. And I think that it's super, super important to always force the teams to think about, and especially now when you're operating at scale, we're operating at scale. So building things that do not scale not necessarily work for us, right? As I said, it may be okay that they started with some manual use or some, and I'll give you some good examples. But if you don't have line of sight of how you're going to scale it, that's going to be a problem, right? I'll give you interesting examples. Like, for example, when we were releasing voice communication on the platform, one of the things that we needed to understand, okay, if everybody in Roblox starts using voice, again, going to anticipation, what kind of challenges can we face? Are we going to have challenges in the areas of trust and safety? Are we going to have challenges in the areas of cost? And one of the ways people can solve for that is say, well, we're just going to launch in one market and we're going to keep it to 10% until we learn. And you said, no. I can anticipate that there's going to be a high cost if we have to have a lot of human moderation. While important from a safety standpoint, this needs to scale in some way. So now you force the team to say, hey, I'm not going to let you release until you tell me what is your strategy to scale. And for example, in the case of boys was, okay, what are we working with our infrastructure team to manage the cost to serve boys in a compelling way? Are you architecting the system so that when there's 1 million users, 10 million users, 100 million users, the cost structure works? But the second one was on the safety side is we care deeply about safety. We care deeply about this system being safe. How are you going to guarantee that this system is safe even at scale? And then they start to looking, okay, how much are we going to do with human moderation? How much can we automate? What is the path to that automation? And again, even if they launch the first piece without all the components in place, the path to get all those things is already designed. And if you miss that, you're going to be you're going to be lingering or in this limbo state for too many months before you can scale it to everybody. So it's not that you're going to ship at scale day one, but you're going to accelerate the path to scale because you force people to think about it from day one.
And that connects to the principle around the system design, right? Because even though you might not have all the pieces in place, so you do not have to overinvest in building infrastructure or hiring more people, at least you have a line of sight. It's not
Right.
we're shipping the thing and see how it goes.
Yeah. But again, the shipping the thing and see how it goes, but it would be a failure in anticipation that you release a feature and you knew that this could be a problem and you didn't think about it and you didn't make a deliberate choice about how much were you going to invest up front, when are you going to release a solution for that scaling problem. So again, it's important part of getting ahead of things and knowing what the path is, because if not, you're going to release something and it's going to live in this state of beta, alpha, only 10% of users for way too long. And in platforms like ours, where a lot of the principle is that we give access to everybody to everything at the same time, it would feel unfair, right? If I release a feature and I only give access to 10% of my creators to that feature and 90% of the community doesn't have access, maybe for a week, that's okay, but not for 3 months. You're creating a very different environment for these creators to build their businesses, compete, succeed, and you're breaking their trust as a platform. So you really need to force yourself to say, how quickly is this feature going to be available for every creator and every user?
So on the flip side of things, how quickly are you at killing an experiment?
I mean, it depends, of course. If we validate something, when you go to market and you start seeing, there, by the way, in product, there are two outcomes, right? Or three outcomes. One is something is super successful and you build on that. The other one is it was not very successful. You understand the conditions or the reasons why it wasn't, and you continue to invest. Or you decide to now deprioritize because the impact was not that big and you move to something on. And the third one is when you completely kill it. Like, hey, this is not going to be my code base anymore. Those tend to be hard, and it's a hygiene or discipline that needs to happen. Ideally, once you start building and iterating and you start seeing the path, you put it very quickly in one of the three choices. Success, keep building. Hey, not succeeding right now. We still believe in the vision, but there needs some tweaks. Maybe we prioritize that or not. And the third one is, hey, this is not working. We're not going to invest any more cycles. And then there's a decision of whether you remove it. It varies.
Last one.
Okay.
Well, are you ready?
Let's see.
Uh, Maybe this is the best one. We kept it for last.
Okay.
It says, master the details, strive for subject matter expertise.
This is another one that we have been discussing a lot in the company as a leadership team. One of the things that happen to product people or engineers or designers, and it's sad actually, is that as you're scaling in your career and you go from an individual contributor to a senior individual contributor to a manager of 5 to now a manager of 20 to now running an organization of 100 and 2,000, people forget about the mastery of the building the product and stop doing it in some way. And you become an organizational leader, a manager, the person that is actually organizing people, moving them from one place to the other, editing. You're an editor, you're not a creator. They bring you stuff and you edit it, so you try to make it better, but you're not creating yourself. And in some cases, you may even stop learning how to build better product. And with the changes in technology these days, if you're left out, you're not going to you're not going to keep up. We decided that we value more being in the details and building a subject matter expertise. And that means that as our CEO, as our chief product officer, as our vice president of product, there's a high expectation that you live in the details, that you understand. You're not just passing through what your teams are building. You understand the details of what the teams are building. You shape the direction of what the teams are building, and you can speak to them not by bringing your team to present, but you can actually do it. Of course, everybody gets an opportunity to always share their progress and their work, but you don't want to be too many layers removed from the actual work. And again, this is one that 20 years in my career, now I'm realizing how critical and important it is to live in the details, to be a master of the details, and to become a master of your craft. Because it's great to have expertise in one dimension or two dimensions, that you can be the person that, hey, every time we want to make an economic decision, I'm going to go to this person, even though they are like the most senior leader manager, because they have the expertise to answer those things. So that has changed very much
Can
in
you give
the
me
way I
a
think.
very specific example on like how are you living in the details right now?
I mean, it does mean, look, I'll give you an example, right? We're doing a live event right now. I was there earlier looking at the studio, the cameras and everything that was set up. And again, it's not the trust and verify, but you could have said, well, we have a team, they're going to build it, and I'll watch it on the stream. I want to trust it. And you do trust the people. But it's very different to say, okay, well, what is the run of show? How is this going to go step by step? And asking those questions and trying to understand why are they making those decisions and trying to tune it and not just necessarily let it be. And then, okay, we have actually 8 games instead of 10. Why did we make the decision? Right? Versus in I can tell you in another life, I would just say, well, they told me 8, they told me 10, what's that's not necessarily going to break or change anything. But it's really important to understand the whys, going back, why, like, we're being very deliberate about the decisions that we're making, and there's a plan and a reason for these things. And if it's one, you understand it, and then you can relay it, and then you can have a smart conversation about it. And the other one is also you can question it, and you can know that you're going to get the best answer, and you can help the teams that are building get to the best solution.
As I hear you talk about not only this principle, but in general, the whole conversation, what came to mind is it's preserving the good aspects of an early stage startup, like that optimism, the passion, the hard work, the hunger, and finding systems and ways to do it at a larger scale and empower people to also do not lose that element that at some point might
Yeah.
help that company get to what it is.
You're right in that a lot of these, if reading it, you can think about how do you preserve the culture, the velocity, the optimism, the hard drive of early stage teams. Now, there are elements that I mentioned, like how do you scale, that maybe early stage teams don't need to worry so much about, but at a larger company, you need to do it. But I agree with you that, there's always a challenge with companies that when they go from 10 to 100 people to 1,000 people to 5,000 people, elements of the culture start getting lost. And one of the learnings here, again, I go back, there's people learn not by what you say, but by what you do. So leading by example is super, super critical. Repetition and consistency in keeping those things. And it's funny. Some people tell you don't sweat the details. Actually, no, sweat the details, because in the details is a culture, right? And when you see something that it's kind of off, it's not the biggest deal in the planet, but it's kind of off, and you correct it. The ripple effect of correcting that is probably the culture preservation and the things that are going to allow you to operate at the velocity of a nimble startup.
With that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Great chat.